I'm Aaron Simmons. This is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, May the 8th, 2020. I often tell my students that philosophy is everywhere. And by that, I mean philosophy is not something that is done just in college classrooms. It's not something that occurs only in the pages of Plato and Aristotle. Philosophy is an underlying and underwriting commitment to living on purpose. That, in fact, is something we're all invested in. It does, of course, depend on us having views about the world. So it's not just how we live, it's how we live in light of what we think is true and good and beautiful about living. I say all of this to my students because I rarely am trying to convince them they should become philosophy majors, but instead I'm trying to get them to understand that doing philosophy, living as a philosopher, is something that I want them to do no matter what their job is, no matter where their life takes them, and no matter what it is that they ultimately think is worthy of their time and effort. The way I sometimes put it is, philosophy doesn't tell you what you should love, it instead helps you become better at loving whatever you think is worth it. I was once in Floral City, Florida with my father-in-law, and he said, "Aaron, I've got to take you to this restaurant." This was many years ago, back before I stopped eating beef and pork, but he took me to Pudgees hot dogs. And we pulled up, and I admit I was a little bit nervous. It was basically a trailer on the side of the road and a window that was open in it, a hand-drawn sign that had all the different sizes and kinds of hot dogs. He introduced me to John Sterling, who is the owner of Pudgee's hot dogs. When John found out that I was a philosopher, he actually turned to one of his employees and says, "Hey, you handle the people." And he went outside, sat down at a table with me. There was a line of people waiting to get hot dogs. So he actually walked away from his business for a minute and he said, "Dude, I want to talk philosophy with you." We ended up spending at least an hour talking about politics and religion and all kinds of questions of moral life and how to think well and how to live on purpose. John was the best philosopher at that table that day. I learned from him. John exemplified what it means to live like a philosopher, I think, in three ways. First, he loved doing something well. He made the best hot dog I think I've ever had. And in fact, for a while, his business was under threat because they needed a new electrical system and couldn't afford to get it. And the outpouring from the community was so great that they actually stepped up, helped to engage with him, helped to find ways forward. And now Pudgees isn't in that little trailer by the side of the road. It actually has a full storefront with a full menu and has exploded with its business because he cared about doing something and doing it well. Second thing that he did, he recognized that relationships ultimately are the foundation, not only for good business, but also for life. He took the time to come talk to me, and he did this with many other people. People would come from miles around, and they knew him and he knew them. And third, John recognized the importance of being able to take what you do seriously without taking yourself seriously. In that conversation, he didn't act like, oh, he had the PhD and he was the smart guy. He instead was just authentic and did what he did and asked questions that were really questions for him and interrogated me about some of the views I held. And in doing this, we did philosophy together. We built relationships and we cared about doing it well. John Sterling, shout out to you. Shout out to Pudgees. Don't ever think that philosophy was just a class that you either took or did your best to avoid when you were in college. Philosophy is everywhere because the human condition is not something we're able to escape. We are in this together, and so we might as well do it really well. I'll see you tomorrow, unless a piano falls on our heads.